it's got a wire through the centre of the paper.
It does.
Which is rusted.
Yes, and it's sort of gone, like the black is the iron reacting with the timber. And you can see the lines on the timber. See how some of them have like the black lines.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And the strings are quite different colours to what I've found in the landscape. I'm
so
very familiar with
these
baling
ones.
twines.
Yeah, so the blue's the baling twine. This is silage wrap.
Yes.
And then that's all different baling twines and silage wrap.
Yeah.
And then that one's baling twine. That's baling twine. And then this is silage net that I think it's
that very fine stuff that goes in big bales.
Really fine. So I think this is 6 strands that are braided together.
It's reminding me of nests in my garden made by wattlebirds that include plastic that I can trace it.
It's often the really bright.
Yeah, but
blue.
in my case I can trace it because I've been putting in insulation. So there's the nest is lined with insulation, like polyester, and it's got little bits of plastic woven into the form as well, the skeleton. Which kind of reminds me of questions that you were asking about human intervention and the natural world and how species other than humans interact without our layering. Well, presumably. We don't know. But it feels like your work is all about human relationship with the rest of the world and the tensions involved in that, particularly in a settler culture.
Definitely.
And well, it's about so much, Cara. It's so thoughtful and more than thoughtful. It's very felt and visceral work, feels to me. Like everything is very considered and has time behind it, has been lived into and grows out of personal experience, and the grief is really palpable. I mean, it can only be that way. Like if you're really observing and interacting in the Australian country, then you resonate with that one way or another. If you're connected, if you're not sort of blocking stuff out, and if you've got a mind and a body that's receptive, then you have to deal with the grief and the conflicts and the ambiguities and all of the discomfort, all the uncomfortable stuff.
I feel like a word I think about a lot, and like the tensions is where I try and make from. It's this point of being really unsure, but knowing something is sort of snagging, jarring with me. But I try and think about the word a lot, just unknowing, and then not being sure and making through that. So not having any sort of, I don't want any conclusions through the work, but just make through that unknowing and knowing that there's some sort of conflict and tension that seems significant enough to make a work about.
Unknowing is a nice word. As you said, that I mean, I don't enjoy tension, no. But I guess I'm appreciative of your patience or your willingness to dwell in that tension and pay attention to it and sit with it. Do you want to tell me about how that feels? Like how how do we, you or anyone, how do we deal with grief in this country?
Well, I'm trying to deal with it through artwork,
Yeah.
I guess. And I'm trying to not just focus on grief. Like, grief is definitely a big element or a big part of my practice, but I try and sort of by doing things that are very slow, that are very time consuming, and that and by using materials that are kind of waste or weed species, I feel like I'm trying to honour materials through time, and that's a hopeful thing to do, I think, and a worthwhile thing to do, to kind of sit with materials and try and draw value back into them. Yeah, I don't know how we deal with grief, but I'm trying to sort of, making through it is one way I try. Yeah.
Makes me think of the, I'm not sure where it's come from, but there's a wisdom around saying that action is the antidote to despair. And I know that your action is broader than your artwork. I know that you're the president of the East Upwear Landcare Group. And I think all of us, well, you and I anyway, our action takes different forms, yeah. And I know that sometimes I can feel that artwork is a waste or a folly in given the situation that we're in on the planet and the limited time we have left to really save a whole lot that's dear. And I completely understand the power of art to point to the, you know, what needs to happen, but sometimes I fall into thinking, but that needs to happen so quickly we haven't got time to make subtle work about it.
Yeah.
But then when I come back to your work, I feel like change needs to happen on so many different levels. There's the very, very basic practical level of getting more trees in the ground when there's, you know, been such clearing and all of the flow-on effects of lack of vegetation on country, and then there's the sort of spiritual level of resistance or resilience, both really, to the resistance to the dominant culture of consumerism and destruction, really, and resilience in the face of it, because we can't go back to what the country's been like.
I understand what you mean about artwork perhaps could be seen as a folly at this point in human history, but it still feels relevant to me, and even just as a person, a human, it makes my life feel worthwhile in a way. So it doesn't feel wasted time. It feels like the more I make artworks that are about the things that are most important to me, the more I'm sort of, the louder I'm saying this is important, but in a quiet way, if that makes sense. And you know, we all live our lives in different ways that align with the things that are most important to us, and artwork's just one way of me, I guess, trying to exist in a way that makes sense to me. And yeah,
I guess it absolutely makes sense, and I guess it's another example of this, whether it's Western or just simply modern habit of categorizing, and all of the stuff in your work about lines and boundaries and like, this is art, this is land care, this is, you know, like, that's even a problematic kind of reading of it, isn't it? That I just brought to it.
I was in a chat with Inari, who's an artist, a Funaki artist, but we were talking, and I was saying that I came to a realization a couple of years ago that this, it's not art practice and then this and this and this and this, it's just life, and art practice is one little part of that, but it all overlaps. You know,
That's right,
everything's
and
kind of
absolutely, and some cultures have no word for art. Can't remember who I heard say, we don't have art, we just try to do everything to the best of our ability. And that's everything.
Yeah.
And I find myself wanting to write about compost in the same vein as weaving, or
but you could.
and I probably will.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just loving the way that your work makes me think and feel into all of these notions of categorization, boundaries, human, plant, natural world interaction. Under all of it is this recognition of interconnection, which is such a big theme for me, and questions about invader cultures, both human and plant, and colonizing species, pioneer species, and what they do, and the benefit of a plant that heals land, even if it wasn't the one that grew there originally.
Meant to be there.
And also, of course, brings up notions of, well, this country's always been managed.
Yeah.
And so, who decides what management is wise and what's not, and how is that?
And I suppose, so I practice a lot of weed control in my day-to-day life, I guess, and it's a lot of my works are coming from that place of me practicing weed control, so killing a plant, but also being unsure if this is the best approach. Is this what I should be doing? It's a that's an apple tree that could have grown up to be an apple tree, and these are made from a willow tree that I killed. So we've got English broom over there, which is a highly invasive plant, and I've worked with blackberry and things like that. But I'm not at all sure that I'm doing the thing that's best.
No.
I'm just doing what I think is probably better in that situation, but I'm still not sure.
Yeah.
I use weed species in my work very deliberately. A lot of the time they're not very nice to work with. In particular, the English broom sort of splintered and fractured a lot when I was cutting it. But I'm not just using them because they're an invasive species that potentially threatens habitat and biodiversity and things like that. Well, not just potentially, they do. I'm also using them as maybe a symbol to say, even though this plant wasn't meant to grow here, it's still of value. It's still a plant, and by giving it my time, it's almost honouring it in a way and respecting it and acknowledging its existence. So yeah.
And the forms like this one, the casting of a clump of soil. Yeah. Oh, it's great to actually have it in your hand. Kind of makes me think of monuments that we erect, and oftentimes they carry so much sadness because they're a monument to what's past, and what's past isn't there anymore. And so just, the poetics of that, Cara, the soil washing out from inside of there, and soil is everything.
So I soaked it out, and then I returned it back to the spot that I collected it from. But this piece was quite a big shift for me, or not a big shift, but I realised that whenever I made a work, I wanted to try and value a thing outside of the work, so not make the work of value, but the thing that it refers to. If that makes sense.
So the trace of the original subject. Yeah, which, you know, makes you think of the absence of the subject because it's gone now.
It's
And the same with the cast bramble, you know, the blackberry cane. And also just remembering your speaking about time and the giving of time and the honouring like that. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so I suppose like this piece, just because we've got this piece here, but it took me a long time, and I spent a lot of time holding this clump of dirt. I packed it with water so that it stayed as one piece, and yes, it became familiar. I sort of knew every little contour and every little shape, and in holding it in my hands and spending all that time with it, I feel like I became more invested in, I guess, making this artwork to honour that dirt. And whenever I set out to make a piece, I think, oh, this one won't take that long. This will be the one that I can kind of quickly do, and then it ends up stretching out. But that dedication of time, that's always a lot longer than I anticipate, is important to me, because I really want to invest as much of myself into the piece, and giving time to something is a way that you can put yourself into it.
There's also your very honed attention and recognition of the way that materials speak, the associations that they carry, and your choice of material is lived into. Like it's not random.
No.
You know very deeply what all the associations that every material holds. But then I was thinking they hold that for you, because you're literate in that, and every person interacting with your work will have different life experience and different stories
that they bring to that.
Yeah.
Which I really like that. I like all artists, my work's deeply personal and is drawn from what I know, or think I know, or don't know. But I very deliberately select materials. It's not kind of I don't go for a walk and randomly go, oh cool. Like I think I want to use tree guards because tree guards are so complicated, and to me they're such a symbol of where we are at this point with trying to fix degraded land and fix things that weren't damaged that long ago, and continue to be damaged. And so I use tree guards because of what I think they're already holding when I come to them, and the same goes for materials like old fence posts and baling twine and all these materials that connect to agriculture, because in my mind speaking about agriculture is a really I suppose that there are very clear links between farming in Australia and land clearing. So and kind of all these ideas connected to kind of boundary and property are very important to how I'm thinking.
That human impact on land, which constantly my brain and my heart constantly return to a comparison with another way of being on this planet, and this continent in particular. And your work just reminds me of that over and over and over. It's reflecting on settler culture, but there's always the presence of the alternative. There's always the presence of First Nations culture, and the comparison that's there as a beautiful, an eerie almost presence. Like, this is what we've done. This is what was done.
And I really try and, I guess, speak from my perspective, but of course that's an undercurrent in my thinking, and but like I live next door to a farm, and our neighbours are friends and they're great people, but if one of my chooks flies over the fence, I feel a bit uneasy jumping the fence. And it's a 100-acre property, but I still feel like I can't cross that boundary. You know, it's so ingrained in me that that's their fence line, and I find that that's something I'm stuck on a little bit because that's ingrained in me.
Yeah, the plants don't care.
No, they certainly don't. No.
The chooks don't
care. The chooks don't care.
No, and the wattlebird doesn't care either in my garden to nest in the lemon tree.
Yeah.
And the wattlebird's native, the lemon tree's not.
Yeah.
You know. And native bees love lavender, they love mint, they love sage, thyme, all these exotic plants.
Yeah.
So it's a very human thing, isn't it, to be going, oh, who's this? It's about ownership and control, isn't it?
It's all about control.
Yeah. Well, I love your control of a totally different kind. With your control of materials and the alchemy, really, that you're turning something, and often neglected or definitely uncomfortable, problematic materials like tree guards, like fences, you know, iron from that you associate with fencing wire. Yeah, but I'm also just really thinking about the beauty of this work from a fence post, and you speaking about the impressions, the carving out were originally about dams, you know, the holes that we've dug on country. And then as you worked, given all the time spent, the depressions began to feel more like your fingerprint or your imprint. It's still about human imprint, isn't it?
And it's about holding something too tightly.
Yes, so there's that tension again. But then this work coming from it, you know, that sort of lighter again, more ephemeral impression of this. There's this repetition of presence, absence, what was there, gone. You know, a dam without water in it is an absence. It's sort of like a cast. And then this is the impression of that negative space. Yeah. I also love your inherent material literacy in the use of wood and paper, thinking about trees, about the original source of these materials.
Sometimes I think I'm a bit too literal, but I'm like, I like really clear connections.
Yeah.
You know,
but it's clear to you is what I'm saying. I guess I'm saying that's actually not that common in our culture. It's not that common to hold in the front of your mind an understanding of the source of materials. Because we've become so disconnected from where everything comes from, I think, as a culture in any case. I don't know how many people think about trees as they're writing on paper, or about trees as they're working with timber. You know, I think that's rarer than you think because it's so natural to you.
It feels very obvious.
Of course, yes, but I think a lot of us need reminding. More broadly, you know. So there's a beautiful role in coming back to folly. It's not a light thing, that reminder. Tell me about the colourings, because these works are quite different to many of the others, which are found. They're used in the found state, even if you've carved the bark off something or manipulated into another form or cast it or what have you. You generally haven't applied something. You've usually taken something away. So tell me about this.
These are the newest works that I have in here. And I've just been thinking about this idea of new colours, of these colours that have become part of what we look at and see, especially in particular in a rural landscape. So they're colours of tree guards and baling twine and silage wrap. So they are willow that I've harvested, but I've painted them to kind of refer to these new landscape colours, I guess. And they do refer to some details of particular plants that I encounter
Mm-hmm.
near where I live when I
Mm.
go for a walk.
I find myself uncomfortable, just to come back to the sitting in this discomfort. I find myself uncomfortable with those colours, and partly it's recognising your material understanding, because I know silage wrap.
Yeah.
And I know how scratchy and horrible it is.
Yeah.
And I have spun with it
Yeah.
as well.
I do know, I've never met anyone else who's worked with silage wrap and baling twine except for you, Ilka. So
and who would? I'd recommend it.
I when I'm making the string from baling twine, sometimes that I lose the skin from my fingers.
Yes.
Like it's horrible stuff.
It really is.
It's really fibrous.
Yes, yes. And even the way in the central piece that the twine, the resulting spun twine, which is a very different and much more beautiful thing than the way that it comes on a bale, by the way. But the way that it almost feels as though it's strangling that wood. Like the tree guards strangle the tree, the fencing wire, like all of that, those things. Yeah, they keep recurring.
I'll think I've got a this happens often, but I'll think I've got a completely new idea and I'll make, and then I'll finish it and go, oh no, I think I did that in a different way already.
Yeah. I think somebody said an artist just makes the same work over and over, actually.
Maybe it's just slightly different iterations, and that's still worthwhile.
Oh,
but,
totally.
It just shifts a little bit.
Yeah. I know that experience very personally as well. Yeah. When I'm asked what it's about, it always comes back to the same root.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually, a root is a good visual image of what happens for me when I look at your work and I think about the materials in them, in these pieces, and there are all these incredible threads of my lived experience, my understanding of willow. I have a whole lot of.
I think we'd have very different willow experiences.
Probably. Yeah. Positive, negative, complex.
Yeah.
A little bit sort of fraught, actually. But not just with willow, with everything, with all of the, again, just acknowledging the thoughtfulness and the choice of materials in the work. And there's that same root system type map of associations is there also in the method, not just the material but the method in the spinning. No, I can't see string without, particularly handmade string, without being conscious of the age of that skill worldwide and how key it is in human evolution.
I really like that it connects to. I don't think there'd be many cultures that string making wouldn't connect to, so I think that's really beautiful. And I sort of see the string making as an afterthought. I'll think I need to make string for that piece, and then 2 days later I'm still making string, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I forget how long this takes every time. Yeah.
Do you pepper the making with, like, do you sit for long periods, or do you do a little bit here and there amongst other tasks?
I used to sit for very long periods,
and then
I had a baby, and so I do a lot of making at night now, because I don't really like being away from her, and I'll do little sort of 2-3 hour stints, but mostly at night in the evening months, sort of from 7 o'clock maybe till midnight. The time I make the most. I'm a bit of a night owl. But if I'll make on the train, I'll make with my dinner next to me. I'll be making string. So I do. I'll sit in the garden and make string often. Things like that.
Yeah. Which is the way that we live. That again, coming back to being a very grounded person. It's all one living. There's making string, there's making a meal, there's making a bed for a child. I wonder about this hierarchy of activities that we. I know I've really appreciated the garden and the compost and the other tasks rising in importance for me, and I feel as though your work brings those things. In my reading of your work anyway, and encountering it, is it
it speaks of something outside of simple aesthetic. It speaks of something outside of art, or it brings to mind questions of value. You know, it's broader than itself, but it represents a whole lot in material form.
I think like I also really like that most of my work, not all of it, but most of it, I don't need many tools. I use some wood carving tools and things like that, so it's very portable. So I can kind of make in different spots, and it's very domestic. And it does connect to all of those things, like you're saying, like to cooking and to doing house jobs and the garden and
Like the question Garland magazine's been raising, or for me forever, about craft, and even the word craft. What is it? To craft, a verb, you know. Yeah, it's all, culture is what the people do, and crafting is just making in all forms. Yeah, I want to just acknowledge that making throughout your day, and realise that your actual crafting, spinning and so on feels like the tip of an iceberg. Like there's the lived, there's the walking country, planting, the land care work. Tell me about what proportion of your time is actually spent on this stuff.
I'd say my sort of creative part of my life, creative output, I'd say a third of it maybe is physical making, but a really big part of my practice is taking photos, and I find photography helps me capture maybe the essence of something I'd like to translate into a work or works. So photography almost kind of can distill an idea that I can then draw from. I also do a lot of drawing and a lot of writing. I often will go off into the bush over the road and sit and write for an hour or so. Feel like that day. And then there is once I've decided on a material that I want to use, I'm actively seeking that out. So I'm collecting, baling twine that I find snagged on fences. And I also find a lot of silage net on the side of the road, in sort of tangles on the side of the road, and tree guards. I find sort of in the undergrowth or in a creek. So I'm sort of always collecting these materials, but I guess my practice is kind of a swirl of all of these things interacting with each other, and the making's the end result.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or
The
the
full
natural
stop.
analogy again, there's that root thing again. It's like all of this happens, and then you just see this little fruiting body.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the mycelium going on unseen.
This is the mushroom.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glory be.
Yeah.